Hi, Jesse. And me? Hi,
Uh,
Jesse.
yes, okay, yes, I can. Oh, thanks.
Okay, I'm making you host, right? So I'm
Yeah,
gonna disconnect now.
okay, good. Thanks so much.
All right. Okay.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Hello.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for staying on. I appreciate your patience. We had a bit of an unexpected, a little bit of a crisis that was resolved. So
Not like
I think,
hurricane or so.
no, 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 no. But
Okay.
we were able to sort it out, thankfully, and thankfully you guys didn't run away. So we have St. Vincent Grenadines Red Cross here. Our chair is here. We have Sedima is here. We have Dominica Red Cross. And we have our consultant. We have Tanya with us. Uh, I think we don't have quite a quorum yet. Um, Let me just, Colonel, maybe just I would just send a quick message to everyone and then maybe we start with who's here.
Okay, do that. Let's hold a couple of more minutes while you do that.
Okay, thanks so much. Colonel Hussein. So we don't have a quorum yet, but I sent a message to a few persons. I believe Captain Wynn said he accepted the meeting, so perhaps he might join later on. Lily Bowman is on leave, so she won't be able to join. Um, I'm not sure if anyone from Nemo SVG will join, but perhaps if we go ahead, we will be able to, at least share the information. And if we need to make any decisions, we unfortunately will have to, if we don't have any additional persons, we will need to defer the decisions to the next meeting. But I think as we have the consultant here, we can still proceed maybe with some sharing of information.
Good. So good afternoon, everyone. I must say that I did put some pressure for us to have this meeting in December, and I know the challenges that, especially in what we're going through. But I think it was wise that we do have some information and share, the kind of information that we will of our accomplishments over the past year, instead of going into the new year with these kind of with that without knowing, or having an assessment of how we did over this year. So yes, we may not have quorum, but over the this during this meeting, I think we would want to ensure that we do have some semblance of accomplishment over the time period. I know we've had an extension, and definitely by the time we meet again next year, we already have a plan, as to what we hope to achieve in the new year, which will be the year of for closure of the IDRL project, and and all the accomplishments and work that we would have done over the past couple of years, would come to fruition. So I'm glad Ms. Chambers is with us. I know it's challenging for her to be here today also, but we did work out at the time. And so definitely, Jesse, let's go ahead and have all the information available. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Colonel Hussein. So I will put the agenda up on the screen. So maybe since we've had the opening remarks from our chair, maybe for the minutes, we can just do just quick introductions so we make sure we know who's here. So I can start. Jesse Jordan, Disaster Law Officer for IFRC. And I'll just go along my screen. We already heard from Colonel Hussein, and next on my screen I see Michaela Reeves.
Good day, everyone. Michaela Reese. I am part of the Young Professionals Program at CDIMA. I am also going to offer my regrets for Colonel Craig. He is currently engaged at the Regional Early Warning Systems Consortium meeting in Trinidad. And also for our logistics officers, they are engaged at the Caribbean Development Partners meeting for the response to Hurricane Melissa.
Thanks so much, Michaela, and I'm happy that you can still represent Sedima. We have next Decima.
Yes, Decima Hamilton here from SVG Red Cross.
great. And then we have Miss James, also from SVG Red Cross.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Dora James, SVG Red Cross.
And we have Miss Roll from Dominica Red Cross.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Sandra Chatterall, Dominica Red Cross.
Thanks, Miss Roll. And we have, of course, our consultant, Tanya.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Tanya Chambers here.
And we also have Sue Fraser, also from SVG Red Cross, I believe.
Yes, good afternoon. Sunil Fraser, St. Vincent Red Cross.
Great. I think that's everyone. I don't think I missed anyone. Okay. So thanks again for the introductions, and over to you, Chair. I think the next is just the adoption, the going through the objectives and the adoption of the agenda. Colonel Hussain?
Yes, Jesse. Right. So you want to proceed with the third agenda item?
Yes, just going
Yeah,
through the objectives of the meeting and the agenda, adoption of the agenda.
please proceed.
Okay, great. So today we just have three simple objectives, really one main presentation. So the first thing is really to review and adopt the report of the 18th meeting, which would have been our last meeting. But as I mentioned, we don't have a quorum today. So if the chair agrees, we can just present the report briefly and adopt it at our next meeting. The second item is the main item in which Tanya would present in terms of what progress she has made already in developing the work plan and the methodology and approach and stakeholder engagement strategy, which forms part of the inception report. So she will be presenting to us, how we will be moving forward with this new assignment, with this new activity. And we'll have a little bit of discussion on that. And then basically that's it. The next thing would just be to agree on our date for our next meeting in 2026. So that's it for the agenda today. And Colonel, over to you. Perhaps we can't really agree, but we share information on what we will present in the agenda today.
Well, please do, because as you say, if we do have quorum by the end, well, then we will just church it, as they say. But please, let's proceed.
Okay, great. So then next would really be the sharing of the 18th meeting report. So over to you, Michaela. Maybe I should just give you some sharing privileges. So just give me a second. Okay, so you should be able to share the screen now. Michaela?
Would you be able to share yours?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me do that then. Okay, so can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can. Thanks.
So I will just scroll to the, I guess, the most
Number
critical
2?
parts
Yeah.
of the, yeah, right here.
Great. All right. So the 18th meeting of the IDRL working group was held on September 12th, and we went through to review and adopt the reports of the 15th and 16th meetings. And we also looked at a presentation from the IDRL CIMIX tabletop exercise. We also got some information on the finalization of the IDRL report and IDRL provisions consultancy, and also on the proposed consultancy to develop the model IDRL regulations. After that, we got more into the meat of the matter. So we received a presentation on the workshop report for the IDRL CIMEX tabletop exercise, and this went into detail for each day. And so on day 1, we focused on the pre-CIMEX workshop. So basically just getting you into the know about what was to come. Day 2 was more of the exercise where the national and regional or international assistance phases were tested. And on the final day, the groups were able to present on the action plans which they developed, noting the gaps, the strengths, and the recommendations, which became clear because of the exercise. And this would help in clarifying roles and responsibilities of the different agencies which were involved, which would assist in strengthening and creating MOUs for private sector or civil society organizations so that it would be a more efficient and accountable disaster response system. We had Colonel Hussein indicate that the CDC would be looking to extract the findings and recommendations which were relevant in order to implement them. And we had some suggestions from Ms. Hamilton to ensure that the guidelines could be developed on how these recommendations would be implemented. Colonel Craig also proposed that the recommendations be included in the next iteration of the country work program. So these recommendations could be extracted and placed into a spreadsheet so that it would be easily tracked on and monitoring the implementation of the recommendations. And we also noted that the revisions for the CDM model legislation and regulations, it would be useful to include them in this. Next, we had an update on the consultancy to develop the model IDRL regulations, and these regulations would complement the model IDRL provisions for the CDM model legislation, which would contribute to outcome 1 of the IDRL working group work plan and allow for strengthened national capacity to develop laws, policies, and plans to address the issues of international disaster relief, and also to contribute to output 1.2 of the IDRL working group work plan towards strengthened IDRL provisions for the CDM model legislation. As far as the last meeting, we had presented the proposal for the IDRL to the IDRL working group and developed the terms of reference, which were reviewed by SEDIMA. The position had been identified and 3 candidates were shortlisted. The interviews had been scheduled for the end of September. As far as the expectations of the consultancy, it would be to develop an inception report, which would provide a detailed work plan and methodology on how the consultancy would be approached, and a legal and policy review report would be developed, which would identify the areas of regulatory support, which would be assessed against international and regional best practices. Then there would be the stakeholder consultation report, which would contain a list of stakeholders who were consulted, the summary of their feedback, and a record of how this feedback had been integrated into the draft and final versions of the regulations. Then the model IDRL regulations, which would be the main output of the consultancy, and that would show clearly the structure and legally sound regulations, which would be in the context of the Caribbean Commonwealth jurisdictions, within the framework of the model CDM legislation and regulations of SEDIMA. And they would be accompanied by explanatory notes or rationale for each part. Next, there would be the presentation to stakeholders. And so the consultant would be required to do a validation and sensitization session, including with the IDRL working group, with the national disaster coordinators, and with the SEDIMA Technical Advisory Committee to TAC or other subcommittees as required, and also with key national stakeholders, so persons from agencies such as immigration, customs, legal affairs, finance, ports and so, and also with international organizations or non-state entities who might be involved in humanitarian operations. So possibly the UN agencies, NGOs, Red Cross societies, and academia. So with the consultancy expected to last for 9 months, so that would take us to June of 2026. The next steps which were identified were the selection of the consultant, the contracting and onboarding process, the submission of the inception report, and the progress update, which is to be given at this meeting. Further, there should be a preliminary presentation of the draft regulations to the SEDIMA TAC, which was in April of 2026. We hope to incorporate the feedback from the TAC and finalize the regulations in April or May of 2026 and finalize the consultancy in June of 2026. We also noted the proposal from Colonel Craig that the submission of the deliverables would also be accompanied by a short policy level brief and presentation so that it would be able to go through the channels to the Management Committee of Council in May and the Council of Ministers in June as part of the approval and validation process. Then our last item was on the implementation of outcome 2 of the IDRL Working Group work plan. And this was presented by Mr. Campbell. It focused on areas such as the national and regional coordination guidelines, plans, SOPs for communication between non-state, state and non-state actors to address IDRL, national logistics plans for IDRL, the integration of IDRL into the military space and within the logistics systems. And so we noted that for the national and regional coordination, there was the successful IDRL CIMEX workshop, which was held in March of this year. And we were looking to sensitize major actors in relief and logistics, such as the Chartered Institution of Procurement and Supply, SIPS, through their emergency response framework. And we would also be targeting the logistics thematic working groups so that they would become familiar with IDRL. And Ms. Jordan, on behalf of the IFRC, was invited to the thematic working group meeting to provide this information. Then we would also want to be strategic in our information sharing so that there could be the development of MOUs and also the incorporation of IDRL into the SEDIMA Regional Coordination Plan. So that would also be done. And finally, under that point, in addition to the IDRL CIMEX exercise, which was held in Guyana, we would want to, due to funding constraints, do more exercises like this virtually, so as to increase the amount of persons who are aware. For the national logistics plans, we noted that there were constraints, including Hurricane Beryl last year, regarding the plan to incorporate IDRL into these logistics plans, but the intent is that the logistics associates would help to carry this message forward. And we noted that in Trinidad and Jamaica, they have already included and referenced IDRL in sections of their national logistics plans. And there is a plan for Belize and for Guyana to integrate IDRL into sections of their national logistics plans. There would also be the development of guidelines, which would be used to communicate the IDRL planning and communication into the plans. The Caribbean Regional Civil Military Coordination Cell and the Multinational Caribbean Coordination Cell. We were going to use these as ways to integrate IDRL also, but we noted that there would need to be some advancement in the groups before that could be actioned. Then there was the integration into the CLS system, though we noted that there would be some modifications to the logistics program at SEDIMA, which would be used to integrate this. And that is what was covered at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michaela. So I will share the agenda. Are there any questions or comments on the report?
Well, for me, Jesse, that was a refresher of, some of the things, we're just clicking into place because, we multitasking so much these days that we forget some of the things that we were doing, and we were supposed to do. So thanks for that report, indeed, Ms. Reese. I don't know if there are any other questions or any other comments.
Or perhaps maybe any updates since the last meeting?
Well, I could start with one update, is that all of us know about the issue of funding and, the withdrawal of funding by certain entities, and, the change of programs because of lack of funding by other agencies that are affected. So recently we were engaging with the World Bank. They were doing some work with our ministry, our government, and they realized that we have a situation where we do not have our own legislation for disaster. And for them, one of the big things about putting money up on the table or whatever assistance, is that you're saying once you have a disaster legislation, that ticks off a big box, and that helps to pave the way for other types of assistance, other types of funding, etc. So we are now trying to engage them to do some work with updating our disaster bill. As I said, we've had it revised, and right now we just need to, you just need to take it on the last leg, refine it, and take it to Parliament, and that's our aim for next year. So just wanted to share that, that we do have we do have some momentum with regards to our disaster law bill. This year we had an act that named us as a national competent authority, and that act was the Oil Spill Act. It has a long name, but I just refer to it as the Oil Spill Act. So definitely, we would want to have that our own disaster legislation, which dovetails with the Oil Spill Act, and all the other acts that are available, like for the environmental people, for the Petroleum Act. Everything must be in sync and without any conflict. So we're hoping to go that way by next year. God's grace. Over.
Thanks, Colonel Hussein, for sharing that very important update. And I'm happy to hear that you are able to move forward with the bill with support from the World Bank. That's really encouraging. And I wanted to ask, in terms of the outputs coming out of this working group and your parallel process with the bill, how do you envision that informing the process that you are doing with the World Bank?
Well, we haven't we haven't started. We just engaged, and they're saying
Right.
that because ticking the box for disaster legislation is a big thing, they're willing to help us to get to that point.
Okay.
So through some kind of consultancy or whatever, but based on what you just said, Jesse, we're here trying to engage with Jamaica and assist in Jamaica. And, we're coming up against a lot of issues because of course, everybody has their own legal and law and whatever. But it was not as easy getting disaster relief into their country, you know. And just like how we were discussing, what are the bureaucracies with the customs and excise department, um, even up to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sending a diplomatic note saying, here, we're sending X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Their country are putting out needs lists. We want this, this, and this. But other people, other donors want to donate other things, what they think they need. So it was a big, for us was a little concerning, and trying to engage these disaster office when they are, they themselves are affected and not in sync with everything that's supposed to happen because everybody's affected. So we definitely will have some lessons learned from all of this, you know, because when you load something in an aircraft or a boat and you call it disaster relief, and they're asking you what's the cost, you have to submit a commercial invoice, you have to declare this, you have to get an airway bill, and these things are not forthcoming because that was not how it left the donor country. So definitely, and when all these manifestations are happening, I am thinking to myself, maybe that's why we need to have some kind of legislation in terms of the IDRL in order to refine these things to make sure that when you're speaking to your counterparts or when you're speaking to the officials from the the airline or the customs or something, that everything is being done according to some kind of you know um, protocol or pre-established arrangements on these things. So indeed, Sedema themselves might have to may be able to tell us about some of these developments in Jamaica that we thought or we were accustomed to that would have gone smoothly, but there were hiccups along the way because of some of these same issues, where the boat is going, whose authority is it, or the port, and it was really a bit challenging indeed. And as I said, I wanted to share that story here because we're still dealing with it. We still have to send more relief supplies to Jamaica. So because they will take a while to recover, and those you don't want those issues to 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 um, to affect the future assistance. Right. I
Yeah.
leave that there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing those important observations. We had done an IDRL study for Jamaica like 10 years ago. I think it was, Tanya, maybe more than that now. But given
Definitely
this,
more.
more,
It was actually in 2011, so about 14
right?
years.
Right. Wow. So I think given the scale of this disaster, which is, unprecedented for Jamaica, it will definitely require us to perhaps do another study based on the outcomes of what happened now. And, that could shape, how things move forward for the legal and policy framework in Jamaica. I see Ms. James, you have your hand.
Yeah, I shut a hand up.
Yes, funny that Hussein mentioned about Jamaica because I had that question, so I want to know if I could bring it in here. To look at what happened in Jamaica, the impact of the hurricane on Jamaica, and if there was anything new that emerged that we could and I'm also looking at AI and all the things that could happen. I don't know all about it, but I just want to raise that.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, we're lucky that our consultant is in Jamaica and is Jamaican and is living it now. And I know Tanya has been tracking some of the developments. But you know, it's an evolving situation. So definitely some observations I think can be pulled from the experience, but it may require, let's say, a separate, more in-depth study to really pull from what's happening once things have settled. But you know, perhaps Tanya, you know, in what scope you are able to bring in. I mean, it's a very short time frame, but perhaps there's some some things that can be gleaned from your observations at these initial stages. But I don't want to extend the conversation too long because I know we have Tanya and she has something to share with us, and she doesn't have, I think she has a limited time with us as well. So maybe if Chair, if it's okay, if we can move to the
Yes,
next item.
yes, thanks. Tanya, you could go ahead, please.
Yes. Okay, great. Okay. So Tanya, over to you. I will just give you sharing privileges.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, everyone. Just acknowledging the discussions that we've been having and saying, you know, I have been trying as best as possible from external to the core formal systems to keep abreast. And I know the Red Cross here has also encountered quite a number of challenges, although it's a known, trusted, and very experienced partner of the government of Jamaica. So it really speaks to the necessity of this document and of ongoing research in this area to ensure that we get the best options for our Caribbean people. So with that in mind, I'd love to just run through this Inception report really quickly and use this as the modality of discussing my work plan and approach with you. I will be going through some of the content relatively quickly, but of course it can be shared afterwards for further deliberation. So I want to go through three elements. Let me see if I can put it on. Please confirm that you're seeing the larger screen.
Yes.
Okay, so there are three elements that I'd like to share. One is just a review of what the consultancy is designed to achieve. I won't spend a long time on that because I believe Miss Reese would have covered quite a bit of that in the minutes, but I will go in a little bit more detail in the methodology technical approach and what we can expect in terms of a work plan or a work schedule. So the purpose of the consultancy, again, I have more detail on the slides than I will go through presentation wise. So please, you can expect to receive a copy of the document. Are you seeing the slide entitled Consultancy Purpose?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, as was stated before, the main core purpose of the consultancy is to develop the model IDRL regulations, but of course, there will be a process leading up to that to ensure that we benefit from the model CDM legislation and regulations that were and policy that would have been developed previously, as well as additional research, including, as we were just saying, the lessons learned from activities that have happened since then. As was mentioned, the deliverables would be, the inception report, an initial document capturing the legislative and policy review and outcomes of the research process, a stakeholder consultation report that captures broadly the content recommended by different stakeholders in providing their feedback, either prior to the development of the draft or after. And then, of course, the model IDRL regulations as the core document and presentations to stakeholders as well. So to go into the methodology and technical approach in a little bit more detail, the aim is to ensure that what we develop as a model regulations on IDRL is driven by evidence from research that has been conducted previously, as well as any data available around IDRL issues. We want to ensure that it is well informed by the different stakeholder groups, both at the national and regional levels, including some of the groups that Ms. Reese would have mentioned had been discussed in the meeting prior to this one in terms of logistics and procurement personnel. We want to ensure, as is good practice with all legislative drafting, that we have an outcome document that is people-centered and gender responsive. So in any areas in which it becomes necessary to isolate any vulnerable group, whether they be issues surrounding IDRL support, differentiated on the basis of gender or age or disability status, or support provided to indigenous groups, migrant populations, etc., that we cover those issues. Benchmarking against global standards is critical, while we strive to ensure that we adapt any global good practices to our local institutional contexts and legal norms. In terms of methodological steps, we begin with documentary research, including benchmarking. So looking at documentary sources both from internal within our region as well as from the global context. We want to engage with some stakeholder discussions early on out. Throughout that process, any meetings of the technical working group will assist with vision clarification and consensus building. And we also try to do that in the meetings and discussions that we have at the CDMA level. From a drafting perspective, we want to try to ensure that we use plain language drafting techniques so that the outcome document is readily understood even by parties who may be less familiar with IDRL conventions. And then, of course, throughout the process, we want to ensure that appropriate reviews and validation processes are taking place. And so these are really the different methodologies that you will find reflected throughout the consultancy process. I have more details on each, and I'll touch on a few items as we go through. In terms of the documentary review and data analysis, of course, the CDM legislation and policy that was developed earlier this year would form a critical component of that. However, any other law, rule, guideline, etc., that has been developed around IDRL or international humanitarian assistance can provide a useful guideline or pattern for us in terms of what works in the Caribbean context. And so the documentary review will be a little expansive, even though the CDM model legislation and policy were developed out of a significant documentary review and data analysis process. This still requires additional, research to ensure that it is grounded against best practice in terms of the details that are captured at the regulatory level. In the context of doing that, the benchmarking is really critical. So as some of you may know, the Red Cross, for example, has a model law on IDRL, which includes content that will be very relevant at the regulatory level for us in the Caribbean. And of course, there may be other contexts and considerations around logistics, around other relevant issues, including how IDRL may interact with climate change issues or other global social norms around accountability and transparency in humanitarian aid, etc. So any relevant benchmarking tool will be reviewed and key principles incorporated in the document. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we have identified a number of critical target groups. I'll go into more detail on that shortly, but just to say that the approach is designed to ensure that the people who are ordinarily involved in both policymaking and IDRL implementation will be brought to the table, both state and non-state parties. Now, once we go broad with consultations, it is likely that we will have different viewpoints being brought to the table. And so at key junctures, we will want to ensure that through meetings of this technical working group, as well as other CDEMA reference points, we are able to build consensus around what the final content of the document looks like, particularly in any area in which there may be a source of or a difference of approach, either because of the nature of the system in different countries being slightly different, or because there may be a slightly different orientation depending on whether you are coming from the perspective of the giving country, as Colonel Hussein would have suggested in his earlier comments, or you're on the end of the receiving country. So any area that where we find that there is a gap, an issue of ambiguity, a difference in viewpoint depending on where the different stakeholder groups sit, we will definitely raise those issues at this level and above for consensus building. I mentioned before that we will adopt plain language drafting and use the Commonwealth Legislative Drafting Manual and any other relevant guide in preparing the regulations. In terms of the different roles, you can expect from me that I will compile and review laws, research reports, and benchmarking documents, but I will ask you, the working group members, to share your national and institutional laws, reports, and documentary information. This is particularly important for any member of the working group that is in a country where IDRL issues have been raised, where the DRM legislation is new or is newly developing, where you have developed guidelines around IDRL, or reports of how countries have handled IDRL issues in the recent past. So any relevant documentation from your national or institutional contexts would be very timely here. From my end, you can expect that I, of course, will be at the forefront of interviewing and engaging stakeholders, either in individual or focus group contexts. Based on the group of invitees, we will ask that the working group help to facilitate the engagement of national and institutional informants, depending on the group that we're looking at. I will prepare draft documents and I will ask that we book time ahead for reviewing draft documents and providing feedback. Okay, so let me go into a little bit more detail as we review the actual workflow start to finish. And so this consultancy will be broken down into more or less 5 stages, some of them overlapping, but there are 5 critical sets of activities that have to be conducted. The first one, desk research, and that's where the documentary review, benchmarking, and legislative research will be completed. That process is ongoing currently. Secondly, the live consultations, which we expect to start early next year, followed by the actual drafting or compiling of the model IDRL regulations, and thereafter a validation and finalization processes. This is what it looks like against a calendar. While the contract for this was signed in October, I did lose quite a bit of time once Hurricane Melissa hit. My home and office are not necessarily in ground zero, but right adjacent to ground zero. So that led to quite a bit of disruption in services for about a month. So that means we've lost a little bit of time, but I have tried to rework the entire work schedule to ensure that we end at with a reasonable time frame for completion of the contract. So the research is ongoing and will continue. This is desk research specifically, will continue until the end of January. The consultation process will begin in February and March. Drafting will start before the end of that consultation process. And then once the draft is completed, it can be circulated. We can have a couple validation exercises. And then once we have content from that, we move towards finalization. Now, these are broad strokes. The two exceptions that I will put on the table already is that from a consultation perspective, there are certain pre-planned meetings that may happen outside of these wide bands. And I would make myself available to attend, for example, any meeting or subcommittee meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee for SEDEMA, or any meetings of this technical working group, etc., etc. Additionally, while the aim is to complete the desk research by the end of January, certainly any additional documents that come to the fore afterwards, I will integrate and incorporate as necessary. But in broad strokes, this is what the schedule will look like. I won't go into all of the details in terms of a description of each activity, but I'll give you a quick overview of what each of the phases will look like. I've said much in terms of the documentary research, but just pointing out here that in particular, in working on the model IDRL changes to the CDM legislation and policy, I would have come across the fact that both Bahamas and the British Virgin Islands have developed recent legislation, guidelines, etc., that touch on IDRL issues. And so those are two countries that are emerging now. Of course, coming out of the Jamaica situation, we expect to be having lessons learned and, the opportunity to learn either from the documentation coming out of that or from the presence in our focus group discussions of persons who are on the ground in Jamaica and who have particular insights from Hurricane Melissa. We would expect to capture both at this phase of the research as well as in the stakeholder consultation processes again. And again, the working group would be expected to forward any relevant information. And here I want to make a plug for the institutions, in particular the regional institutions, organizations, and collaboration groups that touch on different angles of sight of IDRL. So whether it's procurement, logistics, customs and immigration, border security, health, et cetera, that any, regional institutions in which we participate should really be brought into the ambit of this activity. And we should see how, whether they're documented best practices and guidelines or their presence in our meetings can help to enrich this particular process. And so, to summarize, the desk research process will therefore go from November to January, will address proposed modifications to the CDIMA model will look into the proposed modifications that were compiled in last year's report, look into any proposed and actual regulatory reforms that have come out of recent major disaster events. We'll look at either draft or new DRM legislation, guidelines, policies, etc. And we'll look at one of the things that I've asked Jesse to see if it exists is any draft or existing IDRL law or regulation that doesn't come from the Caribbean but comes from another part of the globe that, because of their disaster history, may have gone ahead and developed something of the sort. So I don't know if it exists, but if it does, we will definitely bring that into the ambit as well. So to move on to the consultations, again, I've said quite a bit here. Just want to add that these will most likely be done via virtual focus group discussions, which we will convene around certain, brackets of target groups, which I'll share shortly. And we will ask the working group to assist in identifying, recommending, and where necessary, facilitating the participation of national and institutional target persons. So here are the 5 broad groups so far. Once we get through developing checklists of personnel in each of these groups, we may find that we need to split one or expand, etc. But here are the broad groups that we're looking at from a consultation perspective. The Regional IDRL Working Group, of course, represents a touch point for consultation and validation, as does CDIMA's Technical Advisory Committee, subcommittees, any other group that we are able to rationally interact with over the course of this consultancy. Beyond this, there are 3 main brackets. One is the national disaster coordinators. Very often they are depended on by their countries to inform the direction, scope, and content of all DRM related laws, plans, guidelines, policies, and protocols. So their perspective is quite critical. Beyond them, however, there is a wider network of policy developers who work in sectors that will be expected to have an implementing role here. So earlier we had considered, we'll meet with attorneys general, and we still want to keep that group as a relevant stakeholder, but we want to anchor the government response of each country within a broader policy target group. So it can include attorneys general, but it should include policy personnel that represent immigration, customs, foreign affairs, legal affairs, ports, finance, and any other group that has a critical role to play in the coordination, facilitation, and oversight of IDRL. And then the last group would be our non-government partners. So key international organizations, humanitarian relief organizations, and disaster relief organizations who have been active within the Caribbean region and can inform our perspective from a non-state angle of sight. We can also include any academics working in this area or researchers working in this area as well. Then we move on to drafting. And of course, my role is to pull together the actual regulations using a format that reflects our drafting styles and protocols in the Caribbean context. Certainly, where there are any national drafting protocols or guidelines, we would ask the working group to check on what may exist in your country that you're able to share with me as well. The regulations will contain annotations or explanatory notes that give a rationale for all of the sections and subsections. So just to be clear, the drafting will occur between March and April of next year. It overlaps a little bit with the consultation process so that we don't lose too much time. So, with consultation, sometimes you have to work around the schedules of different individuals. So I will attempt to start, let's say the skeleton or the framework for the draft regulations while the consultation window is still open. Okay, so what the final document will look like is that it will have the text, the headings and notes that you'd ordinarily see in legislation, as well as special explanatory notes that will help to provide context for any group or entity that uses the content in future. In addition to explanations, there may be some aspects of the document where we provide more than one option or way of doing things. Some countries, for example, do their coordination through their National Disaster Organization. Some do it through their Foreign Affairs Office. And so when you're talking about coordinating actual entities, there may be a number of different ways of looking at what goes into the content of the IDRL regulations. Some do it, or some have done it in the past using the cluster approach that is common with UN entities. So having that as an option could be useful for those countries that want to adopt that going forward. So there are going to be some aspects of the document where we give more than one option or way of addressing a particular aspect of IDRL. And for those areas, the explanatory notes would provide added guidance in terms of how you adopt and adapt different options. And then winding down, we would have validation processes. This would be a second, more modest round of stakeholder engagement exercises. Again, with the technical working group being at the helm of presentations to review the content of the document. So I will work on developing presentations that capture the aim of the regulations, the output from stakeholders, and the content that we are proposing for the actual regulations themselves. Again, depending on the scope of these activities, you may have a role not only in attending meetings, but in recommending key stakeholders at this stage whom we may wish to include in validating the final document. I believe these dates are the old dates. Sorry, I should have changed these. So again, we will look back at these consultation groups to see what's relevant. We won't perhaps have as many activities at this stage, but certainly we will want to map against any CDEMA activities that are already in train and give at least an opportunity to go back to the wider group of policy developers, international organizations, etc., who provided input. Since this is more along the lines of validation, we may, instead of having a focus group discussion, have it in the form of a virtual webinar with a larger cohort of people. So, in other words, have one validation meeting with all stakeholders invited, present the core content, and then get any feedback there. That would make the process, of course, a lot more efficient. Once we come out of those, then we will likely have comments from the technical working group, comments from our stakeholder webinar, and comments from any CDEMA processes that I am able to participate in by way of presenting the draft regulations. All of those comments and feedback will have to be rationalized and used to finalize the document. If at this stage there are any outliers, like recommendations that are conflicting with other recommendations or that take the whole nature of the regulations in a direction that is different from what the working group had initially envisaged, then we will definitely have to come back to the working group to discuss. If we find, however, that the recommendations are really around polishing what exists, then I would report to, IFRC and CDEMA on those processes and provide my finalized document as well as my finalized stakeholder consultation report that would look at all of the stakeholder inputs and what was included and what was not included. So that would take us to the end of the process. And of course, not just at this juncture, but in other junctures, your review and feedback provided on as timely a basis as you are able would be very critical to moving the process forward. So that's my overview. I'm not sure, Chair, if there are any questions or feedback at this stage, but otherwise I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you, Tanya. And I think that definitely puts us on track. It gives us the alignment and how we will go into our finalization in the new year. That is exactly what I was hoping for in this meeting, and to have that kind of look forward. So thank you so much. I think it was very detailed and very in depth, and I would definitely would like you to share this presentation with us. And maybe because we didn't have quorum, Jesse could probably get it out to all the other members of the meeting. I don't have any questions, but except to say that thank you so much for this orientation as to how we will be moving forward. Over.
Thanks so much, Tanya, and definitely, Colonel Hussein, we can share the presentation with the group, so that they can also be updated on how things are progressing. I like your Tanya, how you structured your consultation process in terms of the groups, the specific groups you identified, and I have some ideas already jumping in my mind as to what would be perhaps the most efficient or perhaps most impactful way to receive those comments and feedback, and being able to really get the valuable input you need for making these regulations as relevant as possible to the region. So we can certainly discuss further on how we what you've proposed on the screen, how we can bring it to reality in that sense. I think that aspect is usually one of the more challenging parts in terms of how do you collect that information?
Indeed, indeed. So looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah. I know we are a bit, we've reached our time. I don't know if anyone has questions for Tanya. Perhaps not at this stage. So, Colonel Hussein, if it's okay with you, maybe we can move to the summary and then decide on the next steps for our next meeting.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
So, put the agenda on the screen and pass it over to Michaela, who will take us through the summary.
Sure. So the intent of this meeting would have been to review and adopt the report of the 18th meeting of the IDRL working group. We have, however, not reached quorum, so we were just able to review, and we will defer the adoption to the next meeting. We heard from the consultant responsible for developing the model IDRL regulations, and we had a presentation of her work plan, methodology, and approach to stakeholder engagement. We also noted her request of the working group to share national laws, reports, and institutional guidelines to assist with the consultancy, and also to attend meetings and identify key stakeholders for the consultation. Next, we are to agree on the date for the next working group meeting, which I will hand over to Jessie for her to take us through that.
Okay, thanks very much, Michaela. So I hadn't done any consultation on the next date of the working group, the next meeting. But I think in terms of making this a productive space, and Tanya being this activity being the main activity of the working group at this point in time. Tanya, I recall in your work plan that you should be complete with desk research about the end of January or so.
Yes.
And the legislative review and policy, the legislative and policy review, is that around the same time? When will that report be ready?
Yes, so proposed for the end of January.
Okay. So Chair, my proposal is that perhaps our next meeting could focus on a presentation around that deliverable. So Tanya will be able to present those particular findings, and we can also have a very focused discussion on how we will be engaging with stakeholders. I think that process would probably already have started before then, but we will be able to follow up and put more plans and so on in place at that meeting. What do you think?
You're thinking that we should set the timings for the next meeting?
Yes. So seeing that Tanya's next deliverables would be around the legislative and policy review report, which is due at the end of January. I was thinking that we can focus our next meeting on that presentation and perhaps schedule something in early February.
Good. So what that could probably take us mid-February?
Yes, I'm just checking the dates. I know we have Carnival in February this year. Well, next year. So it's around the 16th of February, 16th and 17th. So it could be before those dates or after.
We could try the week of the 10th, the 9th, the week of the 9th. We could do it maybe by the
Yes.
Thursday, either Tuesday 10th or Thursday 12th. We could go.
Tuesday 10th or Wednesday 11th.
Yes, that too.
Oh, the 10th, 11th, 12th. Yeah. Okay. How does that look for everyone? For Tanya, of course.
I'm fine so far.
Okay.
That's fine for me also.
Okay.
I don't see anything on the agency calendar so far, but no meeting Thursdays. So Tuesday or Wednesday, please.
Okay. Yeah, okay, all right. So, Colonel, say what is your preference, Tuesday or Wednesday?
Let's do the Wednesday.
Okay, so Wednesday, the 11th of February. Okay, sounds good. All right, so we have a tentative date, Colonel.
Correct.
So over to you.
All right. I'd just like to thank you guys for making a meeting this afternoon. I know it was challenging, as I said earlier, but nevertheless, I think as the chair, I'm leaving better informed, and at least we know how to plan forward. Bearing in mind, our next plan meeting now is until February. So I'd just like to thank Tanya for making the time for this. And Michaela, you are now, you're really a seasoned campaigner here, I must say, the way how you articulate. Thank you. And Jesse, to you, thank you for being so patient and trying to, maneuver, monitor, and bring us together. And I'd just like to thank everybody for all the hard work during the past year. I really like the document that Tanya has, the presentation. I think it has a lot of meat inside that we could work, articulate, and project. So I'd just like to close by wishing everyone all the best for the holiday season. And then, as Jesse is true Trini style, ensuring that we meet before Carnival. By the way, here's before Mashramani, so that's a good time. So, well, it's not a weekend, but the festive season is very much on many of us. Christmas songs are playing all over the place. Things are circulating. People are traveling. So do have the best of holidays. Tanya, I know you have some challenges back home, but we're still with you because that's our business. Disaster management is our business, and we're there for you, and that's how we work. So for all the other all our other colleagues from the other countries, Dominica, etc., do have a good and happy Christmas. And if you feel too many things shaking and too many waves there, just come to mainland Guyana and have a good Christmas. So thank you. And Tanya,
Thank
you
you
want to have
very
a
much.
final word? Tanya, you want to have a final word?
No, just all the best for the season. That's all.
Okay. Bye bye, guys, and stay well.
Bye. And we wish you the best for the season also. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. All the best. Merry Christmas. Bye.
Bye-bye.